Could proposed reforms in Russia in the 1960s have kept that country a superpower? We'll have an inside look at those possibilities.
This program was made possible by funding from the UCF Global Perspectives Office.
Hello and welcome to the Global Perspective Show. I'm John Bersia, Special Assistant to the President for Global Perspectives at the University of Central Florida. When we think about reform in the history of Russia, the name that most often comes to mind is Mikhail Gorbachov. He's the figure associated with reforms in more recent years. But there was an earlier reform period, one led by Nikita Khrushchev. And that reform period is one that bears examination. Today we'll be talking to his son, Sergei Khrushchev, who is a scholar at the Watson Institute at Brown University, and he's going to talk about what happened with those reforms and what might have happened if they had played out. Welcome, Dr. Khrushchev.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up with your father as the Soviet leader.
First of all, it was not very different that you were growing up in any other similar place like White House or Windsor Palace or any others, because you have many privileges, but you have many limitations, because even if the Soviet Union was the closed world, then my mother and my father, my parents told me, you mustn't do this, because you're all the time exposed. And if you will behave such way, you will be like Stalin's son Vasily. That was the worst what they could say.
Mm-hmm. So your father is associated with a reform period in Russian history that many Americans don't know a whole lot about. Tell us, what was the impetus for reform during that time and what some of the broad ideas were that he presented?
The broad idea was to make Soviet Union more powerful and more effective. And it was two aspects. One, it was the reformation in the foreign policy, that moving the world from war to peace, because Stalin's idea was that war with the United States inevitable, and will start it not later than 1955-56, and he concentrate all efforts of the military build-up of the Soviet Union. For example, Soviet Union built the replica of the B-29 bomber, and they built 10,000 of such bombers. That was obsolete if you were not preparing for the war. They were. And when my father came to power, he told that we are wasting our resources, because if we're investing in the military, we're not improving life of our people. So first he tried to find out, is it possible to deal with outside world without the war? And after the first meeting in Geneva with President Eisenhower, leaders of Great Britain and France, he came to a conclusion, yes, but we have to show them that we are strong. It is beginning of this policy of crisis, at the same time peace coexistence, because at the Khrushchev time he reduced Soviet armed forces from 5.5 million to 2.5 million, and planned new reduction up to 1 million, and reduce all this military spending, because he told if we'll have intercontinental missiles with nuclear warheads, nobody will attack us. And he told that the huge military spending doing us weaker. He told his generals, yes, you all want to have these best weapons, but if I will allow you to do everything what you want, you will leave us without pencils, he told. We will ruin our economy. And his focus first was to feed Russian people, because it was even in Moscow lines in the bakery studying the 6 o'clock in the morning for the loaf of bread, and have their shelter, because Soviet people at that time, after 2 wars and the Stalin tyranny, they didn't live in houses like other people. They didn't live in apartments. They live in rooms. In one room, 100 40 square feet could live 3 generations, 10, 14 people. So he started this program of the building cheap apartments. It is two things: invest in agriculture, make this profitable, so that he told we mustn't force them for work. They have to be interested to work, so they have to understand what they will have to the work, what will be their revenue. And what we're doing now, he told, we're paying for the 1 pound of potatoes to these people less than it is cost to bring this potato from the field to the city, not talking about the expenses. So it was first beginning, and then it was the second. He has intuition. Each reformer has intuition. And we believed in many aspects, by the way, on the both sides of the ocean, that centralized economy can be more effective than decentralized economy, if you want to say market economy. And at that time, it's look, yes, that you can concentrate all these resources in one hand and invest them somewhere when you want. It is true for the war. Even during Second World War, American economy was barely centralized. But if you're trying to make decisions to cover all aspects, it's not working. It's not working because it is bottleneck problem where you cannot make all the decision in one body with the best computers, because it is impossible. But you have to resolve this problem only if you will just cut out this the bottleneck, neck from the bottle.
So he came in with a reform agenda, and initially there was some interest and enthusiasm because of the possibilities his reforms held for improving the Soviet system. But as time went by, some obstacles appeared. What was it that caused certain members of the party and others to turn against the reform path that he had proposed?
He didn't come with reform agenda, because it was the Yeltsin team that destroyed Russia came with agenda. He came with the idea that we have to find out how to make everything working better. I think it one agenda for any reform, and then finding different things. And he started to change this society. And his society was decentralization, economical, political, putting some frames on the political system, because he told that we have to make change system such a way that the Stalin would never return. And it's made, from one side, the economy working better. It was the best, most successful 10 years in the Soviet economy. But it also affect the Soviet elite. It was not Communist Party. It is mistake in this country, because party was ordinary people. It was elite who was surrounded the top. And it was very well bribed by Stalin. By the way, Stalin had the system that if you are in some top position, you will be paid your salary for you at the head of your department. But then I will pay you twice more in the envelope. You know, it is my payment, and you just have to be loyal for me. And Khrushchev started to change this system. His agenda was very different. He told we have to work to the country. So he undermined these ideas. He stopped this illegal payment, and he told that we have to decentralize the economy, to shift the power to republics, to regions, to factories. It was his last idea, similar to what Deng Xiaoping did before. And for this elite, that means instability, because Russia is a different country than the rest of the world. You can be as successful and as rich in Orlando as Washington, D.C., and you don't want to move to Washington, D.C. In Russia, in the Imperial Russia, in Communist Russia, in post-Communist Russia, Moscow and the rest of the world, it's two different countries. You're very successful, you have very flourish in Moscow, and you will move 100 miles from Moscow, you will live in the Stone Age. It was at that time the same. And he started just to move these ministers who came to Moscow crawling from all other parts of there. They established them, and then they sold them somewhere on the east, the 11th time zone, and Kamchatka, and some other places. And they didn't want this. So the idea of the overthrowing Khrushchev was stability. They told, we need stability, but not political stability for the country, stability for ourselves. If I will have my office, if I became minister, I will be minister for life. If I became member of Politburo for life. Different from Khrushchev, he told, you will have 2 terms, like American president, and then you have to go on. Why it was this aging problem of the Russian elite and leadership when Gorbachov came to the power? All of them were on their 70s and 80s, because then they could not do anything, because they lost their physical power.
Sure. So as you were talking, I was thinking his proposed reforms were, in a sense, very much like those proposed in China under Deng Xiaoping, who didn't come in with an agenda as such. He basically said, I don't care if the cat is black or white, so long as it catches mice. He was a very practical approach, and he wanted to reform the system so that it would make China stronger, and it sounds like this was very much the case.
It was just the same, and only Khrushchev did it 20 years before Deng Xiaoping in 61, 62, and Deng Xiaoping was late 80s. By the way, it could make many changes. Will be Khrushchev in power, it will be no invasion in Czechoslovakia, because Dubček did the same what Khrushchev did, because in this case he would fall of Moscow. And why Brezhnev and others want to suppress the Prague Spring, because they suppressed not Dubček, they suppressed all this heresy of Khrushchev that just emerged somewhere on the periphery of the Russian Empire, or the Soviet bloc. Because he told, we have to give all the power making the decision to the directors, and they have to only want relations with the state, sharing their profit, that you will translate to the normal language, mean pay their taxes. And it was experiment. In one of these agriculture big farms, state farms, when they gave this freedom for the director, he increased the productivity 7 times. He decreased the amount of people who work there 5 times. And the salary of the ordinary worker in the state farm was as high as the salary of minister. So, and it was 48 such enterprises. Khrushchev was ousted of power in October 15, 1964. And he just finished this experiment, wanted to implement it at the beginning of 1965. By the way, it was such, how to say, I don't know which word to say, but this team, it was team of the 100 young economists who prepared all the papers. And they finished this, all the paperwork, and make this draft of decrees, and they mailed it to Khrushchev, but he didn't receive it. It was the Kosygin who received it. And he used some of his ideas in his so-called Kosygin reform that made that 5-year plan most successful in all Soviet history. But Kosygin was different from Khrushchev. Khrushchev was a reformer and Kosygin was bureaucrat. So Kosygin reform was 90% restoration of the centralized system and 10% giving the freedom for the directors. And you cannot combine this together, because or you give freedom to the directors or you're restoring command system. You cannot survive together, all together. And so in 10 years everything went down, slow, and we came to all this command system.
It's always fun to engage in a what-if discussion, and you were suggesting what if Khrushchev had stayed in power, there might not have been the intervention in the former Czechoslovakia. And then more broadly speaking, what if he had stayed in power and the reforms had continued and expanded? Could Russia have become the first of the communist countries that was an economic superpower?
I would a little bit modify your question, because Khrushchev couldn't stay in power to accomplish everything. He was 70. But if his successor will follow this reform, I think that CIA intelligence estimate that we sent to the president Eisenhower and Kennedy was right, and they predicted that Soviet Union and Soviet economy will triple American economy in the end of the 20th century. So it was possible that this happened, but we're never living with the if. We don't know now what will be with our country, with the United States in 20 years, and we didn't know at that time what will be in the Soviet Union. We believe in this because we launched Sputnik, we launched first man in space, we were so successful, we thought, yes, we will do this. But later, when it started the stagnation, when you didn't reform the country, they did not reform this country for 25 years, and not adjust it to the changing environment. It was less and less trust in the system, less and less thinking that it is happening something different. All innovations coming from the outside. And in the end of the Brezhnev, I remember I worked at that time with the computer industry, we have a joke about computers, how the Japanese delegation came to our Silicon Valley, it was near Moscow, named Zelenograd, and they showed them everything, and the director asked, gentlemen, I know we're behind you. Can you tell me honestly how far we're behind you? 2 years? Or maybe 5 years? And Japanese, they polite, they smiled, said, no, 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 you're behind us forever. And it is Soviet joke. It showed that how mood changed from the enthusiasm of the Khrushchev time that we can do it, to this pessimism of the late Brezhnev time, we're behind you forever.
So very interesting possibilities. So we will never know if Russia would have become the main communist economic power before China if the reforms had played out. But eventually reforms did come to Moscow under the Gorbachov period, and those reforms were again designed to strengthen the system, but in the case of Gorbachev, as we know, they created a whole series of developments that led to the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Where do you see Russia going since the end of the Cold War?
When we talk about this, first of all, I want to say that the same, if you not changing in the nature world, you will extinct the species. If you are not adjusting your system to the changing world and the economy, you will extinct the country. What happened with Russia could happen with any other country. United States was lucky for their history. Each time in these changes they could do it. So Gorbachev was unsuccessful because he came to at the time when country was ready to the revolution, not for reformation. And it was many other mistakes. But with Russia happened what happened with many of these powers or superpowers and empires. It's disintegrated and lost their ability and will for the leading. And now Russia is a big country, rich with the natural resources, with really no will to be a leading force in the country. They still have this nostalgia to the past and, of course, the huge nuclear arsenal, but they became more and more like attachment to the European Union, supplying European Union with natural resources. And when we're talking that Russia, the European Union depended from Russia, I will answer you very simple. 74% of Russian foreign trade is trade with European Union. 4% of European trade is trade with Russia. So who depends from whom? It depends just because Russia depends from them. And I think that in this case, the Russian elite satisfied with this. There's many problems there, huge corruption, still more than 50% living below the poverty. But after Yeltsin time, the new leadership, with all the problems that we face in Putin and Medvedev time, they trying to do something. I don't know whether they're successful or not, but I want them to be successful because I think that it will be for the best of the Russian people.
Where do you see the United States-Russian relationship going in the 21st century?
You know, before we were dependent from each other. It was two superpowers who remained after Second World War, who tried to adjust to each other how they will rule this world. So it was Cold War was about this. It was this policy of crisis was about this. Now, as Russia is not superpower, our relations became more emotional. I would say we not depend from each other. United States depends from China. The Russian trade with the European Union, I'm repeating, about $250 billion. Russian trade with Turkey, a little bit more than $50 billion. Russian trade with United States, less than $30 billion. So it is like teenagers. I love you, I don't love you. It was, it was the best example, President Bush. He looked in the eyes of Putin and say, oh, Volodya, I love you. And then after that, Putin did something wrong. So now I don't love you. And then maybe now we just rethinking the policy and saying maybe not love you. So I don't see any possibility of the future of the Cold War and competition between Russia and the United States. I hope that we will be friends because it will have nothing just to share. I don't think that Russia will be the junior partner of the United States. They have their own understanding and their own agenda in the world. But I'm repeating, I believe, and I want and I hope that we will be friends because I live here and my children and grandchildren live in Moscow.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have had some positive developments in the U.S.-Russian relationship. We had the passage and ratification of the New START Treaty. The two countries definitely have a common interest in terms of fighting the political violence that is erupting in different parts of the world. So there are issues on which we have reason to work together.
Yes. Of course we can, like any other countries, because through this period when the military industrial complex took control over all the countries, we produced many times more nuclear weapons that we need for our security. I remember that our calculation was that we need 300 to 400 warheads to destroy American infrastructure. And my father told after that we'll stop producing not only conventional weapons but the missiles. And by the way, I asked Secretary McNamara many years later, who was miscalculated. We thought that will have to be 400, and you started deployment 1,200 Minutemens in 1962. Why? He told no. We have the same calculation that we need about 300 warheads to destroy the Soviet Union. But when we showed it to the president, Kennedy told, guys, you are crazy. I won elections on the missile gap. Triple it or quadruple it. So we start this. I read this in the American press that now one of the scientists, military scientists, wrote that United States need, I think, about 200 warheads for their security and nothing else. So if we will reduce all these things just to some reasonable level, I cannot say to zero, it will be in the interest of all of us because you have more weapons and more insecure world. Of course we will, I'm repeating, I want to be friends and we will work and cooperatively in many other fields in security, making our life and our earth better and more secure.
What are some of the big problems that you see coming up in the years ahead that might be a good opportunity for the United States and Russia to work together? We talked about arms control, we talked about terrorism. Are there other issues that you think would make us natural allies?
I think that the world becoming smaller and more interdependent. We cannot return to the Cold War because we passed this period of time. But competition, confrontation in the world is endless. And now we turn to the competition in the economy, in the currency. And here we can work together, or maybe United States rely to that country that keep their reserves in the America, including Russia, even Russia now very nervous, until this country will decide how they can change the economical strategy, that we will reform this country to still keep our leading position or give it to somebody else, to European Union, to China, or to India. And here it is, I think it was possibility of the cooperation with Russia, because when I'm talking this, the no cooperation, it's also true and untrue, because Russia building some factories, and the automotive industry is investing in Russia, and maybe Russia will be the 6th or 5th producer of car in the world in coming years. It is many things that we can do together.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Khrushchev, for joining us today.
You're welcome.
And thank you for the Global Perspective Show. I'm John Bersia. We'll see you next time.
This program was made possible by funding from the UCF Global Perspectives Office.